So good afternoon and welcome to Pearson's Insight Webinar 17, which is on the topic of apprenticeships for existing employees. If this is your first time joining one of our webinars, then we hope you find it valuable and can take away things to apply in your organisation. And if you joined a webinar previously and are becoming one of our regular audience members, then welcome back for this one. Today's topic is a fundamental part of the decisions that need to be made around what you want apprenticeships to do for your organisation. Do you want to invest in the people and skills you already have? Do you want to invest in skills supplied from outside the organisation through new recruits? Or do you want to do a combination of both? And the choices you make come with their own challenges and implications, and it's important to understand why you might want to invest in existing employees and how you go about doing this. So hopefully this webinar will bring you some of the insights you need to make informed decisions in this area. So who will be taking you through today's webinar topic? Well, I'm Joe Bassi and I'm your host for today, and I'm pleased to welcome Anne Ashworth, who is our Head of Employee Apprenticeships and is the architect of our apprenticeships programme here at Pearson, and is someone who has 30 years experience in the skills sector. Today's webinar is going to be part presentation and part panel discussion, and we have 5 panelists with us today who all have experience of apprenticeships for existing employees and will be taking part in a Q&A to delve into their experiences and insight, and I'll introduce them properly before that part of the webinar. And before we start properly, I'd like to briefly share a little bit about who we are as an organisation and why we run webinars like this one. So we're a major UK employer with around 4,000 employees in this country and many more worldwide. Also one of the largest awarding organisations in the UK, providing qualifications under the brand names you may recognise, such as BTEC and EdExcel. We also provide apprenticeships products and services, and crucially, we are a levy-paying employer with more than 120 apprentices in our workforce, having started out in May 2017 with an initial cohort of 30 apprentices. And our apprentices are undertaking apprenticeships across 16 programs through a mix of frameworks and standards from level 2 all the way up to level 7. So this experience we have in this area is something we seek to share in these webinars. So today's schedule, in simple terms, we're going to look at why you might want to consider apprenticeships for your existing employees and how you would go about doing this, what you'll need to consider, plan and explore. And we will then combine the why and the how into a panel discussion Q&A, where we'll hear the experiences and insights of those who have been involved in some form or another with apprenticeships for existing employees, including 2 apprentices from Pearson. As I mentioned previously, please feel free at any point to submit questions via the question function, and we'll take time to pose those to Anne and the panelists at appropriate points. So at this point, I'm going to hand over control of the presentation to Anne.
Thank you, Joe. And good morning, everyone. So I just wanted to start with really the first thought process for anybody that's actually going to engage in apprenticeships under the levy. And that is really, do you consider that you want to offer the apprenticeship out to new employees and bring them into apprenticeship roles? And what do those look like? Or do you want to actually open it up to existing members of staff? And I think using our example, we decided it needed to be a dual approach, and principally because it adds more value to the business. It gives you an opportunity to explore roles within the business that are very specific for becoming apprenticeship roles, but it also gives you that opportunity to open opportunities of learning out to existing staff. And I think, when you are considering employees for apprenticeship roles, there's a number of considerations you have to take into account. But in terms of benefits, they are wide and varied. Straight away, you're looking at investing in your workforce. And that investing comes in the form of obviously the levy being spent on the apprenticeship. But it's not just that, actually. It's about your colleagues feeling supported. There is learning going on that is very formal, very structured. The 20% investment is also consideration. Line managers are heavily invested in the programme too. So actually it's a lot more than just the financial investment of an apprenticeship. And that we have found certainly is a very strong message that goes out into the business. It's given us certainly an opportunity to do some more work with our managers, not just those that are undertaking management apprenticeships, but those managers that are supporting apprentices, regardless of the type of apprenticeship. We're finding that it's really developing their softer skills, their coaching skills, their understanding of career development, their performance management is much improved as well. And of course, aligned with that, you have a stronger focus on career pathways. They become clearer because the standards give you that opportunity to align things to job roles. And certainly we found our development planning has become a lot more understood by various levels within the business. So for example, all of our apprentices ensure that the apprenticeship sits within their personal development goals and has personal milestones to them, but also linked with the way that their job is changing and their career is moving forward. And most definitely, it gives us that opportunity to develop people over time. This is not a short, sharp learning program, which actually is hugely beneficial because it means we can develop people, not just in the job that they're doing currently, but where we want them to go with the future. And we've certainly, I think two of our apprentices actually that's going to be on this today will be able to talk about how their role has changed and how the apprenticeship is aligned to that. In terms of return on investment, and I think the OU, who's going to be on a little later, will talk a bit more about that. One of the things that we're finding is that definite link to improve retention. It certainly reduces cost of recruitment, most definitely. But what we're getting, because we're doing it for internal staff as well as new, is that we're getting greater mobility around the business. Our apprentices are definitely higher profile. The apprenticeship is now seen as a really good quality program, and managers who know that members of staff have been on it are keen to talk to those members of staff about opportunities elsewhere in the business. And that is improving retention, but it's also improving the skill set within the business. Having the opportunity to work with external training providers who are experts in their field means that we're bringing in the latest thought processes and skills within a rapidly changing environment. I mean, we're very much into digital transformation within our business, and being able to work with forefront training providers in that around digital creative technology is certainly adding to the skills of the apprentices, but I would also say there's a knock-on benefit to managers as well. Also, that there have been some significant changes in the apprenticeship reforms and funding rules that really enable an employer to consider apprenticeships for their employees now, and not just new apprenticeship starts. The change, of course, with age range, the funding is the funding regardless of the age of the individual. That's a big departure, and that means now that we can offer it out to anybody as long as they're eligible within the funding rules. We've also got, of course, the opportunity to put those with degrees onto an apprenticeship, and what we're finding is that it's not just graduates coming in to then go and do a degree or a master's degree level apprenticeship. No, they're coming in to do an apprenticeship that's relevant to the job role that they have been recruited in to do. And the same with existing employees. So there is no difference there. The existing employees, we're doing it for the job role. Some most definitely can now go on and do the degree and the master's level, and we particularly focus on leadership and management with those. And that again is giving us that throughput of development for our internal members of staff. It's also enabling us to have progression routes that link into the standards. Some of the standards that are being developed now really do give us a suite of progression. So, for example, the leadership and management, everything from level 3 up to level 7. Project management now, we've got level 4, we've got level 6, level 7's being developed. We're finding project management for our internal members of staff is particularly beneficial to our business. Not just those that do project management, but we have a number of roles where project management, in a more general term, is a key part of that role. And the project management apprenticeship is giving them opportunities to learn those skills and apply those skills in their role, which is really enhancing their skill set and enabling them to apply for promotion within the business. And then, of course, you've got the fact that these new apprenticeship standards are written by employers for employers against current job roles, which means that when we're looking at the standards and the content and the skills, knowledge and behaviours, they're absolutely relevant to our staff and where our business is going, not just now, but in the future. So we're upskilling our employees to not just do the job role they're currently doing, but to prepare them for where they're going to be sitting in the business in 2, 3 or more years' time. And certainly we're finding that our apprentices are definitely a higher profile in the business. You know, they might have been employed in the business for a number of years, but once they've got the apprenticeship under their belt, it's just raising that profile more. And they're becoming people that other managers really would love to have on their team. So certainly it's unblocking things, I would say, for existing members of staff. It's giving them a new lease of life. It's giving them a passion and an enthusiasm about their job and about learning that perhaps they haven't had for a little while. And it's really engaging the business, and that whole message that's coming through is a very positive one for everybody. So we're talking about employed members of staff, and there are certainly some things that need to be taken into consideration when thinking about them for an apprenticeship. We do quite an intensive expression of interest process for existing members of staff in the business. So our process, and I wouldn't say it's the one, but it's one that we think works well for us, is that anybody who's interested in doing an apprenticeship must speak with their line manager and their HR business partner. And they need to have a conversation about whether this is right for them, whether the type of learning is appropriate for them, whether it fits their job role, whether it fits where the job is going and they personally are going within the business. And all of those three need to be comfortable that this is the right decision. So it's quite an intensive process. We call it expression of interest. There's a form they need to fill in. We look at their job role. We obviously look at prior learning, make sure they're eligible. But it's very much that conversation so that HR, who are obviously very supportive of the career development of an individual, has to be part of that conversation. Part of that conversation is the 20% off the job. You know, I should imagine many of you work with small teams like we do. And we have to make sure that that team can cope with that 20% job off the job requirement. And we know it's not just about them going to a training session and physically being out of the team for 20% a week. However, it's still a commitment that needs to be managed. So we very much consider that. So that does mean that where we have people that have put themselves forward for an apprenticeship, we can't necessarily take everybody on at the times of year when we run our cohorts. So we have a pipeline, but people understand that we want to do it properly and we want to make sure that they have the full commitment of the team around them. And it's that 20% that does dictate that in some situations. The other thing we've got to check in that expression of interest is that that particular member of staff is getting significant new learning. And that's important because they might have been doing the job for a few years. And straight away, you're going to say, well, you know, how can they need new learning if they've been doing that job competently? The apprenticeship is not just about how we work. It's about actually the generic knowledge and the development of skills and behaviours that are broader than just our organisation. So we really do quite an in-depth piece with our training partners on that significant new learning, because we do want the apprenticeship to be challenging. We want it to be stretching for the individuals. We do not want anybody joining a program where it's a tick box. Oh, well, I've got that, I've got my certificate now. No, that is not what it's about. A member of staff really needs to get something very meaty and appropriate to them from that apprenticeship. And we have had situations through that expression of interest where after the conversations have happened, the decision is made and generally speaking, the candidate is recognised that really the apprenticeship is not the right thing for them at this time. And sometimes it's professional updating, for example, or maybe it's within our L&D offer that we can offer the training that's more appropriate to them. Another thing that you absolutely have to take into consideration with employed members of staff is the functional skills. It's not because people don't hold the exemptions necessarily. In our particular situation, we have an awful lot of members of our staff who were educated in countries away from the EU. So that doesn't mean to say they're not operating at the right level, but it does mean that sometimes their qualifications are not acknowledged as exemptions for functional skills. So on the one hand, you've got the exemption piece, but on the other, you have the conversation with that member of staff where they're highly educated. In some cases, they actually hold qualifications in English and maths. And you have to say, but you're going to need to do functional skills. So, you know, that is sometimes a bit difficult. but there's a ways and means, and we certainly have those conversations on a regular basis. And if they're not prepared to do them, then of course the apprenticeship is not right for them. But that is something that's slightly different with employed members of staff than it might be for new people coming in. The duration of the apprenticeship is also something to consider. And that's linked to retention, isn't it? Every apprenticeship is more than a year in length. A year and a day is your shortest. Some will go on for 4 years. That's a big commitment, and lots of things can happen in that time. So as much as you can future-proof, you will never be able to do it entirely. But you certainly, as part of that expression of interest, need to be thinking about where's that person going to be by the end of the apprenticeship? Are there things that need to be considered now in terms of potential barriers? Things that could happen. Most of them can be worked around, I have to say. An apprenticeship is really quite a versatile thing, and providing the job role doesn't change dramatically, it is possible that that apprenticeship might still be relevant. Don't forget also there is the personal commitment of time, and again, it's part of the conversation we have with every candidate, is that work-life balance. They're doing a job, but you've got the 20% off the job, but there's also going to be some personal time that they need to commit as well. And it's just double checking that they think this is the right thing for them at this point in their life and their career. Definitely taking into consideration prior learning, and there's probably quite a lot, but it's similar to the functional skills. Is it actually accredited? Can it be used towards anything within the standards? In some cases, yes, in some cases, no. But it's also making sure that it links into that significant new learning, and also to make sure that they're eligible, because you can't do an apprenticeship that is closely aligned to a qualification you've done previously. We've also made some adjustments to contracts of employment. So with a new member of staff, it's a new contract, but with an existing member of staff, we do an addendum to contract, which just really is the apprenticeship agreement and says that for this duration of time, start time, end date, you will be doing an apprenticeship. And then you have the commitment statement that sets out what that really means. And that seems to work well. It doesn't change terms and conditions in any sense at all. It just says that for this duration, you are deemed to be an apprentice. And of course, as I said earlier, about that consideration of role changes during the apprenticeship, we are always managing that. So we get told if somebody's role is changing, if they're getting promoted. We have a conversation with them and the provider about whether that dramatically changes anything to do with their apprenticeship. And if not, it continues. What we have done in some cases is actually added some additional units into an apprenticeship, because the job role maybe requires something a bit more specific, maybe a bit more finance, for example. But it's about that communication. And as long as you are aware of the changes that your apprentices are happening to them, and you involve the training provider, you can generally manage things. And on the very last point on this particular slide, it's very much about aligning the apprenticeship to career progression. We want the apprenticeship to enhance what our members of staff are going to do in the business. We want them to stay in the business. We are wanting them to actually move forward, get promotion, take on extra responsibilities. And we're already seeing the apprenticeship doing that. And that is a big part of that initial expression of interest conversation as well.
Yeah, just as you were saying that, Anne, actually, we do have a question from the audience, which is probably it's a good time to ask this. Question is it still the case that if existing employees are entering into an apprenticeship, that funding is substantially reduced to meet the requirements of the funding rules? And can this be a barrier?
The funding rules set out the bands that apply to each of the apprenticeships that are available. We as an employer have taken the position of paying top of the band, but every employer needs to make a decision based on how they want to work with their providers. We took that decision based on the fact that we wanted a really good service. We wanted to enter into a partnership with our providers. And paying that means that we get a quality service. We do, obviously, there are some reductions in the funding bands coming through at the moment, and we talk to our providers about that. But at the moment, it's not affected any of our programs and the content in the programs and the value added that our providers give us because of the quality of what they offer. So I would say it really hasn't had an impact. We certainly recognise that the funding bands are tight, and we hope that when they're being reviewed, that they are going to be done appropriately for the amount of learning and content and quality of service that needs to be put in place. I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Anne. Thank you.
One of the most popular apprenticeships at the moment is the degree and master degree apprenticeships. And I have to say, it's become exceptionally popular for us as well. And it aligns itself perfectly for internal members of staff. And we principally are following leadership and management. We've just started to offer technology ones. Some of you will be looking at some of the others, like engineering, for example. There's some health and safety and some health and social care and NHS ones, for example, and teaching ones too. But I think what that does, it gives existing members of staff an opportunity to move into an academic mode of study that perhaps they didn't think was going to be accessible to them. And, you know, from a point of view of an individual, if they were to follow a degree, normally it would cost them a significant amount of money. It would be a significant amount of personal time commitment to it as well. And it probably would take a long time, and it wouldn't be aligned to what they do in the workplace. Now, with the degree and the master degree apprenticeships, those issues are just not there. You know, it's paid for by the employer. The 20% comes out of the work time, and the content of the degree and the master degree is totally work related. So it's not theoretical learning in isolation. You can actually put it into practice. And that, I think, is a huge benefit to everybody, and particularly us as an employer, actually, because the projects that the apprentices are doing are so work related that our managers are seeing the benefits. We're tackling everyday problems, and we are able to utilize the expertise and the knowledge that that apprentice is gaining back into the business straight away. So it's become something that is really very, very important to us in terms of our employee development. And certainly it's giving us that opportunity to really identify talent and future senior managers in the business. And on this particular slide, it just sets out some of the main components of that degree and master degree apprenticeship. I think one thing that is still to really be worked through is the degree as it sits within an apprenticeship, because you've got all the rules and the regulations around higher education institutions and the degree awarding, but then you've also got the SFA funding rules and the apprenticeship element of that. And I have to say, our providers that offer that, and we have the OU on the webinar today, have done a really good job in marrying those two together. And of course, working with an endpoint assessment organisation. So you have the degree being awarded by the university, but then you have the apprenticeship being awarded by the endpoint assessment organisation with a different set of assessment criteria. So that is something that I think is really quite interesting and very, very new for the sector. What I love about it, though, which you can probably gather, is that workplace learning piece. And we really do work hard on making sure that line managers are part of this. So for all of the apprenticeships, and particularly for our employed apprentices, that line manager involvement at whatever level of apprenticeship is absolutely critical. And when it comes to this level of apprenticeship, particularly so, because of the work-based projects and making sure that they absolutely are relevant to the job role and to the business. So I can't stress that enough, actually, the line manager involvement. And of course, that's a very different approach to how degrees have run previously, with pretty limited line management involvement, unless you've got a work integrated learning approach. So it really does bring the workplace and the academic study together, which I think is a very positive thing. Particularly with the Chartered Management degree, and it's the one that we know a lot about because it's the one that we offer to our apprentices more than any other, is that it's the level 6, and it starts off at level 4, then level 5, then level 6. So it's very much that structured approach of learning, gets increasingly more difficult every year, going up to however long the degree apprenticeship takes. In some cases, it can be 3 years, in some cases it's longer. The maximum funding cap there, and as you all probably know, that's under review at the moment. And then one of the big positives, I think, of pretty much every apprenticeship now is that opportunity to become a member or to have entry to the professional body of that particular sector that you're doing your apprenticeship in. And in the case of the Chartered Management Degree Apprenticeship, it's becoming a member of the CMI, the Chartered Institute, which, you know, that has not just national but international recognition. That is available at the lower levels of apprenticeships as well. I mean, the project management one, you have an opportunity to become an associate of the International Project Management Association. And that is really attractive to existing members of staff. And also from an employer's point of view, that professional recognition and the opportunity to network with like-minded individuals is always hugely beneficial. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Jo, because you might like to introduce the panel now.
Yes, thank you, Anne. I did actually have another question that came in on the previous section. So the question is, if an employee starts an apprenticeship in one division and has a promotion to another division, could the skills learnt from one course be transferable to another? And an example is given of someone starting off on a finance apprenticeship and then moving to, say, a leadership and management apprenticeship, which contains a finance module.
Okay, there's a couple of things to consider there. If the apprenticeship is significantly different, then it might be difficult to take some of that evidence across to the new apprenticeship. That's the first thing. However, if they're doing an apprenticeship in one division and get promoted into another, then absolutely they should be able to carry on with that apprenticeship. It is about that progression and that recognition of that they've done really well and that promotion. And if that new apprenticeship needs to be tweaked somewhat to take into account the change of job role. So, for example, we've had some that have been promoted into another division, and what we've done there is just added some additional units in that make it more specialised and focused for the needs of the new job role. But the existing apprenticeship was still perfectly fine. So generally speaking, yes, you should be able to move that apprenticeship from one area of the business to another without doing any major changes to it on the apprenticeship system or with your provider. But it's about tailoring it. So I would just go through a similar expression of interest process again and just match the new job role to the requirements of the apprenticeship and see where there might be some gaps in terms of job role evidence and how that could be addressed. And also double check that there's still significant new learning to be undertaken.
Okay, thanks for that, Anne. So we're now going to do the panel Q&A. So I'll briefly introduce the panelists. So firstly, we have Kevin Lyons, who's a senior HR manager here at Pearson and has been heavily involved with the success that we've had with apprenticeships. We also then have Paolo Antonelli, who's a head of account services for work-based learning and further education division of Pearson, and is the line manager of one of the apprentices on the panel, who is Lane Teasdale, who is a service quality manager in Paolo's team and has recently completed a customer service level 3 apprenticeship and is now starting her chartered manager degree apprenticeship, plus has been newly promoted to a management position. We then have Tony Pitts, who is a very interesting story, success story of apprenticeships at Pearson. You may have seen the case study that we shared recently with you in the run-up to this webinar. Tony is a further education and work-based learning centre support manager, has several previous apprenticeships here at Pearson, is now on the CMDA. And we also have Liz Hanway, who's the Senior Corporate Development Manager at Open University and has extensive experience of working with employers on apprenticeships. So I'll now hand back to Anne, who'll be posing the questions to the panelist.
Thank you very much, Jo. What we've done, we've put the questions up for you so that you've got them in your pack for when the webinar is finished. But we have Kevin and Paolo first, and I was just really interested to share with you literally the perspective of an HR senior manager and a senior manager and see if there is some similarity in their perspective. So Kevin, if I could just start with you, you know, you've been very closely aligned to what we've been doing in apprenticeships, and I know you and I work very closely together, but why have you chosen apprenticeships for some of your staff in your division rather than other forms of learning?
Thanks, Anne. Well, you mentioned many of the benefits for apprenticeships in terms of the development of our employees. I've actually said that apprenticeships are the best development plan for decades. So what I mean by that is that you've got all this excellent structured development. It's not a quick fix. It's a program that you can base over a period of time. It leads to a qualification. It affords tremendous opportunity for networking, and it's really good learning and development. And so I always say to managers, if you've got somebody on an apprenticeship, then the development plan is essentially sorted for that employee. And that often can be a concern for managers that, oh, what do I do for this employee? What do I do for this employee? Do I have to put together their development plan? Well, the employee has taken a very large step towards their future development by choosing an apprenticeship. So that would encapsulate why I'm so positive about apprenticeships.
Thank you, Kevin. And yes, I would strongly confirm what you're saying. I mean, majority of the apprenticeships require a CPD log to be completed as part of their endpoint assessment evidence. And that is hugely generated through the development plan that they put together with their line manager and their training provider. And as you say, the detail in that and the benefits to them, so they can monitor their progress and the impact, most importantly, to them and their business is really important. I mean, Paolo, can I ask you the same for your team members? You know, why have you chosen the apprenticeship over other forms of learning?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity. I personally think the apprenticeship is a great opportunity to develop our workforce. There's a wide variety of courses that helps apprentices to maximize their potential in their own role. So I manage a team of 75 people in the contact center, and I have over 10 people doing an apprenticeship course, varying from level 3 to level 5. And for me, because I follow the progress closely, and it's not just about learning, new things. It's about, because apprenticeship provides them with the skills to analyze challenges, situations from a different perspective. And, for example, so there's case studies about what's happening with John Lewis, and that gets apprentices to think about what's happening in the industry and get them to apply what they're learning in real cases, studies. So for me, it's very good to have apprentices in my workforce. You can clearly see the return of investment. Like Anne said, you don't pay anything that comes from your levy contribution. It's very structured, and that can lead to a very rewarding career for the apprentices.
For both of you, I know that we've had some apprentices that have been promoted. Would you say that was down in any shape or form to the apprenticeship that they've undertaken?
Yes, I can. And I can think of at least 5 or 6 examples just off the top of my head of people that are on apprenticeships and managed to gain promotions and managed to achieve where they wanted to go in terms of their career, in terms of a step, because the fact that they were applying for they were involved in an apprenticeship. I also know an employee who managed to get an international transfer because the other organisation in Pearson that was based in another country was so impressed by the apprenticeship program, the depth and the quality of it.
Thank you. And the same with you, Paolo, I think, haven't you? You've got some people that have been promoted.
Yes, absolutely. I have 2 of my former apprentices, current apprentices in different levels that have been promoted recently, and they're both working with me now. One has been promoted to work on global project with me, managing knowledge base, and he's just been shortlisted as one of the 4 finalists for the UK Contact Center Awards, which takes place in the next week. And then I have Lane, who is on the call here. Lane's been promoted early this year, and she's already working with VPs and people from other geographies as well. So, and that's all down to the apprenticeship program that they have taken.
That's wonderful, and great to hear that a member of your team is being put forward for an award, and we're always pleased to see that. And I think that's another thing that has come out actually of the apprenticeships, is that we're definitely raising the profile of people that are being successful, doing celebration events both internally and externally, and a number of our apprentices have actually got to a shortlisting point for awards as well. Thank you both. Right, I'm going to move on now to Lane. who Paolo has just been talking about. And Lane actually has just recently completed an apprenticeship with us, is now undertaking another one. And so my first question for you, Lane, is why the heck did you want to undertake another one after you've just finished one?
So why am I doing another one? I feel like really now the kind of the world is my oyster with learning. I've always wanted to study for a degree, but never really felt like I had the confidence to do it or put myself forward for something like that. Having completed the level 3 and then the promotion and a subsequent, I did the ISO 9001 certification earlier this year. So that's another string to my bow, if you like. And it's just with the CMDA, I think it'll really benefit me in my career going forward, and I think it'll have a huge impact on where I go from here. And I don't want to stop there. I want to do my master's after.
And Lane, I mean, the level 3, very vocationally relevant. This is now an academically focused apprenticeship. How are you coping with that academic focus now?
Yeah, good. I'm on week 3 now. It's always a bit nerve-wracking at first and kind of getting your head around new ways of learning, just a completely different way of thinking, really. But yeah, settling in quite nicely, really. And yeah.
And how are you managing the 20% off the job?
I do a day from home a week, so I can just purely focus on it, and there's no kind of distractions with getting to and from work, so I can just focus on it all day long and probably into the evening.
And is that something that you negotiated with your line manager?
Correct, yeah, that's right.
Okay. And is your line manager very involved in what this degree apprenticeship is going to do for you, you know, in the near future and your future?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that Paolo approached me about, and is very much involved in the apprenticeships program with me, and we're looking at kind of how it will benefit me within my role. I know there's a lot of subject around analysis, which will really help me within my quality role.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Lane, and all the best with your new degree apprenticeship. Moving on now to Tony, who's also an apprentice with us, and Tony's done a few apprenticeships over the years and has just finished her first year of her chartered management degree apprenticeship. So welcome, Tony.
Hi Anne, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are too. I wondered actually if you might just share your experience of apprenticeships and the ones that you have done over the years, and how your career has developed through linkage to those apprenticeships as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know people that have known me over the years. They've sort of followed my journey, but I did return to work after my family. I'd left school with just a general education, and now I'm a departmental sales manager over 2 sites, managing 10 people. It took me a long time to decide what apprenticeship to do. So when I first came back to work, I just started with customer service level 3, which gave me lots and lots of confidence, and it was absolutely the stand-in for starting my learning. I then, with that extra confidence, I applied for a job as a team leader and was put on the team leader apprenticeship, and that was it. That was me flying then, as you know. I then done the management level 3, which I finished just over a year ago. 2 years ago, and then I was approached by my line manager, and she said, I think you should do the CMDA, which I've just finished my first year.
Congratulations. And how has that year been? Because it's a very different type of apprenticeship to the ones that you've experienced before, isn't it?
If you'd have asked me that a year ago, Anne, at this time, I would have said, I'm dropping out, I can't do it, it's just awful, because it was a completely new way of learning for me. I'd not really done any kind of academic learning. So the whole way of writing, the referencing, everything that I had to learn that was new was just a bit overwhelming. But I got so much support, obviously, from yourself and your team, from my mentor, from my line manager. And I made sure that I did keep asking, please, please help, middle of the night when I was not sure what I was doing. So, yeah, with all the support, now I'm absolutely loving it. I'm really looking forward to this term. I've got lots and lots of things to do. There's lots of commitment. It's really, really hard work, but the rewards are just so high. So, really looking forward.
And if I could just say that, I think there's one thing that Tony has pulled up, which is really important for anybody that's thinking of putting employees onto the degree or higher apprenticeship programs, is to do some preparation work with the individuals before. So yes, the expression of interest, but you need to do a lot more. I mean, we've actually put an intro session together with our training providers so that we can really do a little bit of an assessment, but also for individuals to test out the water, to make sure that, what they think they're getting into is actually what they want to get into. Tony, last question for you, but where do you think this might take you then in the business and in your career?
Well, to be quite honest, again, if you'd have asked me this a little while ago, 2 years ago, I was just happy in my job. I like working in the office that I work in, but my aspirations have completely changed. It's all about career progression now. And I want to move with the business. I'm looking at, how I've improved with managing people, projects, operations, the way we show our services to people. Absolutely in awe of strategic marketing and digital marketing. So my focus at the moment is just to get this done and to get through this and to get that square hat at the end of it. But my aspirations, there's just so many things that I'm looking at and thinking, I have got to a stage now where I don't think, wow, that's a great job. I think, wow, that's a job I can do. So yeah, definitely looking at everything around the business.
That's really inspiring, Tony. I mean, that whole different approach that you've now got to your future is fantastic, and great that we've got HR on the call as well, so they can take that on board, because that's where HR are really imperatively important to the apprenticeship, so they know what people want to do and aspiring to do now. So thank you very much for that. Super.
Thanks, Dan.
So now we've got Liz Hamway of the Open University. The Open University have been working with us for, crikey, well over a year now, I think. And equally with Pearson College, offer the degree apprenticeship and now the senior leader master's degree apprenticeship. And Liz, if I could perhaps ask you, firstly, what are the challenges to you as a provider of degree and master's degree apprenticeships in taking on an existing employee as opposed to somebody who's very brand new and just starting their journey as an apprentice?
Yeah, no problem, Anne. Well, firstly, I feel very inspired listening to your apprentices. That's lovely to hear. So what are the challenges between existing and new ones? So I'll tackle it straight off. Normally it is around the 20%. So if I take ourselves as an example, so when the levy came out a couple of years ago, we took on 2 school leavers, 19 years old, as CMDA apprentices. Now for us in the business, that was quite nice because we've got to be promoting apprenticeships. We've got our own levy as well. And it enabled us to actually look at a skills gap and develop a job role specific for those apprenticeship roles, which also meant that we could at the time factor in every Friday that employee has to be off campus doing their study. The following 6 months, when we had our next intake, we then looked at taking on 2 chartered manager degree apprentices of incumbent staff. So this was a different process, so a different recruitment process to before. This one actually went from nomination, so line managers within the unit nominated members of staff where they felt actually this employee would fit the mark, exactly what Anne's been talking about. They're ready to move, to learn new things, in a position and point in their life where they can work, because these apprenticeships, although you get your 20% off the job, there's an awful lot of impact on the personal time as well. So we took on 2 CMDA apprentices for incumbent staff, and the challenge was really then educating the line managers that yes, you're still managing said person, but actually that person's now undertaking an apprenticeship, and actually you need to be mindful of what that really means. So what we do, whether you are an employee of the OU or a supplier like we are to Pearson, we do what's called a line manager briefing. So it makes the managers very much aware as to what they've got to expect, especially if they are currently managing that member of staff. We also found, certainly for the incumbent staff, that they're a little bit nervous, so they have possibly been out of education for a while. They feel quite comfortable in their jobs, hungry to learn, but there's a slight anxiety, especially when you mention functional skills, because we had one lady that hadn't got her GCSE Maths and English. So it was very much different to us, where the new staff that came in were 19 years of age, they'd just done their A-levels, very much used to the study. We're now dealing with 2 members of staff, one in particular that hadn't studied for quite some time. So we worked very closely with the practice tutor and supported them for the functional skills. And again, working with the line manager with regards to the 20% off the job learning. The OU is quite flexible, so unlike the 2 new apprentices where we had 2 days a week, this was very much to the onus of the line manager and the apprentice themselves to work that out. So so the 20% off the job's different. The line manager expectations we've had to look at. The recruitment was different between the 2, and we found that the support enabling them to get on that degree was different, partly because of the educational gap. For us as an employer, though, we felt definitely offering it to incumbent staff really showed that we were investing in our current staff, not just new staff. And just like the stories you've heard today, one of them already has already been promoted, to great development, great retention. The other big challenge that we had is obviously when we took on our new apprentices, we could create a job within that standard. We've had to obviously work very closely because their job already exists, how that matches and maps into the CMDA qualification, and just be mindful there's areas that you probably need to get more exposure of in the business.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Liz. I think that is a really clear outline of some of the considerations that you have to put into place around existing staff. My last question was around research. Now, I'm very much aware, of course, that this is all so new, but I couldn't think of an organisation better placed actually to perhaps give us an update on whether there is any research being undertaken around apprenticeships, and particularly for some of the people listening who might be considering return on investment indicators for their senior leadership team. Are you aware of anything that might be available? Perhaps we could attach it to our pack when we send it out.
Yeah, so in terms of research, the Open University's just done what we call our barometer. So this is more around the skills gap. So actually embarking on, just like we did at the Open University, is actually if we want to take on apprenticeships and it is existing staff or new staff, actually understanding what the skills gap is within your organisation. So I can happily share that with you, Anne. With regards to doing a white paper on impact, we're not quite there yet. That's partly because we're in year 2 of delivering our programme, so we're hearing now this year lots more stories. The CMI in particular last year did publish an article where they sent out a survey, and it was very much around this 20% off the job, because employers were sort of very worried that their managers, they were ineffectively losing them for a day a week, and what that would mean to the business. And there was an article published around actually it's done the reverse and the productivity has gone up. And the reason being is that these managers, and we've seen it ourselves in our organisation, they're apprentices, so they're implementing from day one what they're learning. So I always joke and I give people an example. Introduction to management. One of those things is chairing a meeting. How many meetings do we go to where there's not an agenda, there's no clear purpose why you're there, and what are the follow-up actions? So we've seen, even with our apprentices, able to chair a meeting, they save time because that meeting is kept to an hour. It's a clear agenda, there's follow-up actions, so when they get to the next meeting, it's there. Whereas if they hadn't have had that 20% off the job, would that meeting still be as productive? So we're in sales, and I definitely can see, I was speaking to one of the apprentices and he's now in our global team, and he tapped me on the shoulder to tell me that his new line manager just asked him to do some business analytics on some businesses, and he used some jargon. He said that a week ago he wouldn't have known what he was being asked to do and probably would have thought well out of his depth. He said, but I've just studied that last Friday, and now I know what he's talking about. If he hadn't have had that 20% off the job and hadn't done that learning, somebody would have had to sit down with him and explain it. So it's understanding that 20% off the job, yes, can be seen that somebody's out of the office, but they're not, they're learning, and they're immediately going to implement that into the workplace, and the productivity increases. So if you think again for the chartered managers, these are managers, what we are already seeing, and I think you've already spoken about it with some examples on the phone, is those managers are now developing their staff to go on these apprenticeships and do programs. So you're seeing this ripple effect, and it's fabulous, and it is making a difference.
No, that's wonderful. I think that really, again, affirms everything that's been said on the call. And it'll be interesting to see this research as it comes out, because I think that's going to point out some very interesting aspects to apprenticeships that perhaps people haven't necessarily thought about in the first instance.
Yeah.
I think that's us for the panel then, Joe. Are there any questions at all?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. The first one is about the funding cap. So it's the maximum funding cap. Is it per apprenticeship or per person?
It's per apprenticeship, which means per person, because obviously it's an individual that undertakes the apprenticeship. So when you put a person onto formal apprenticeship learning, that money is attributed to that individual, and that's that individual's learning all the way through from start to finish. And if there's a break, then that money is stopped. If there's a change at all or they leave, then that money is also stopped. So it's linked to the individual, but it's also per apprenticeship as well.
So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you for joining, and we will see you next time.